There are certain machines that do not need movement to feel alive. They can be parked under a faded gas station sign, resting in the late afternoon light, and still seem to hum with confidence. A line of chrome catches the sun. A tailfin rises like a piece of sculpture. A windshield wraps around the cabin with impossible optimism. The hood stretches forward with the certainty of a nation that believed tomorrow would be larger, faster, brighter, and more beautiful than today. This was the golden age of American automotive styling. Not merely the age of big cars. Not merely the age of chrome. It was the age of courage. The age when designers were allowed to dream in steel. When the automobile was not just transportation, but a public statement about power, progress, prosperity, and imagination. Today on Timeless Treasures, we step into that world. A world of fearless proportions, dramatic surfaces, and details so expressive that even people who know nothing about cars can feel their effect instantly. Because the best American cars of the chrome age were not designed to whisper. They were designed to arrive. And in that arrival, they told us what America wanted to believe about itself. To understand why this era still feels so magnetic, we have to begin after the war. The United States emerged from the Second World War with industrial confidence on a scale the world had never seen before. Factories that had built bombers, engines, tanks, and military hardware were ready to return to civilian life. Families moved outward into the suburbs. Highways expanded. Consumer culture accelerated. The future was not feared. It was marketed. And the automobile became one of its most powerful symbols. This was not just because cars were useful. They always had been useful. It was because in post-war America, the car became a visible expression of the national mood. A good car was no longer just reliable. It needed to look modern. It needed to look successful. It needed to carry, in steel and glass, the idea that history was moving forward and America was leading it. No country translated that mood into automotive design more dramatically than the United States. By the early 1950s, American car styling was already beginning to separate itself from the pre-war world. Bodies became lower, wider, and smoother. Pontoon fenders and integrated bodies made cars feel more complete, more sculpted. Chrome spread across grills, bumpers, moldings, and hood ornaments. The automobile was becoming less like a carriage that had evolved and more like an object designed specifically for the modern age. Then the optimism intensified. Aviation and the jet age began to influence everything. Aircraft, rockets, radar, speed, futurism. These were no longer military or scientific images alone. They became consumer fantasies. And nowhere did that fantasy become more visible than in Detroit design studios. Harley Earl, Virgil Exner, Bill Mitchell, and the stylists working under them did not think like cautious product managers. They thought like theatrical architects of desire. They saw the car as a stage on which the future could be performed. That is how Chrome Age courage was born. Tailfins were one of its clearest signatures. Much has been written about where they came from, and part of the answer is simple: aircraft. The Lockheed P-38, among others, shaped the visual imagination of American designers. But the deeper reason fins took hold is more interesting. They represented directional confidence. They made a car feel like it was already moving, already cutting through air, already part of the coming tomorrow. On a Cadillac, the fin was elegance with ambition. On a Chrysler, it became sharp and assertive. On an Exner-era Plymouth, it could feel almost rebellious. By the late 1950s, some American cars wore fins so dramatic they bordered on surreal. And that is exactly why they still matter. They were not timid. They believed design had the right to be expressive. And expression in this era was never limited to the rear of the car. Look at the front ends of the great American machines of the Chrome Age. They had faces, and those faces carried identity with startling confidence. Grills were not reduced to abstract openings for airflow. They were architectural statements. Some looked formal and aristocratic. Others looked like jet intakes. Some were smiling. Some were stern. But very few were anonymous. Today, many vehicles chase aggression because aggression is easy to market. But the best American styling of the 50s and early 60s had range. A car could look optimistic without looking weak, luxurious without looking soft, powerful without looking hostile. It could carry its identity in proportion, bright work, grille texture, and stance, rather than relying on exaggerated anger. That is one of the reasons the era feels so rich even now. The cars had personalities distinct enough to remember. Then there was the chrome itself. It is easy to mock chrome from a distance, to call it excessive, to see only ornament. But that misses the point. Chrome in the American Golden Age was not random decoration. It was a material language. It highlighted edges, divided surfaces, framed grills, emphasized wheel openings, stretched body length, and caught the light in motion. It gave visibility to geometry. And critically, it gave mass-produced cars a sense of ceremony. A chrome spear along the side of a Buick did not just separate colors. It elevated the body. A hood ornament did not simply identify the brand. It crowned the machine. A bright bumper did not only protect the body, it announced solidity. Because chrome, when used well, made a car feel expensive even before a door opened. And yes, American designers sometimes went too far. That is part of the fun. But even the excess reveals something admirable. They were willing to risk ridicule in pursuit of visual drama. That willingness is what the title means by courage. These designers were not operating in a culture of endless restraint. They were not rewarded for making everything neutral, flattened, safe, and globally acceptable. They were rewarded for giving each brand a vocabulary, a silhouette, a dream. Chevrolet should not look like Oldsmobile. Pontiac should not feel like Mercury. Chrysler should not speak with the same visual accent as Cadillac. The result was a landscape of extraordinary variety. You can feel that variety in side profiles alone. The hardtop coupes looked glamorous and airy, with thin pillars and expansive glass. Sedans carried stateliness. Wagons felt long, practical, and still elegant. Convertibles seemed made for parade routes and evening boulevards. Even pickups of the later Chrome Age could carry a surprising amount of visual dignity. Hood shape, windshield angle, roofline, wheel opening, trim placement, all of it worked together to create identity. This is why the phrase fearless styling matters. It was not only that designers added chrome or fins, it was that they believed proportion itself should have theater. Now look inside. A great American interior of the Chrome Age is not quiet. It does not apologize for wanting to feel special. There are colors modern interiors would never dare attempt. Red, turquoise, ivory, gold, deep blue. Steering wheels with translucent rings. Dashboards that stretch in horizontal elegance or bloom with aircraft-inspired instrumentation. Push-button transmissions. Bright trim that frames the radio like a jewel. Seat patterns that try to create atmosphere, not just durability. Many of these interiors were excessive, but they were also alive. Modern interiors often claim sophistication through subtraction. Fewer buttons, fewer textures, more black surfaces, more glass screens, more hidden functions. Sometimes that works. Often, it merely creates a cabin that feels expensive in price and anonymous in spirit. The best Chrome Age interiors were the opposite. They were specific. They were committed. They wanted you to feel that you had entered a world. And that is why they remain unforgettable. The 1950s especially were a perfect storm for this design confidence. The economy was strong, fuel was cheap, bodies could grow. Safety and emissions regulations had not yet imposed their later constraints. The culture rewarded novelty, display, and visible aspiration. If a designer wanted to stretch a hood line, lower a roof, widen the grille, or wrap a windshield farther around the body, there was room to attempt it. This freedom created beauty, but it also created distinction. A 1957 Chevrolet Bel Air does not merely look old, it looks unmistakably like itself. A 1959 Cadillac is so outrageous in proportion and fin that it becomes almost impossible to mistake for anything else. A Chrysler 300 letter car carries its authority in restraint and menace. A Continental of the era projects disciplined wealth. The machines spoke clearly, and the public responded, because the automobile was one of the few consumer objects that could combine mobility, architecture, fashion, technology, and identity in one purchase. In that world, style mattered because style was aspiration made visible. Of course, the golden age was not endless. By the early 1960s, the pure exuberance of the late 50s had already begun to soften. Tailfins shrank, surfaces became more disciplined. The best designs of the early and mid-60s often carried less theatricality and more confidence. They did not need to prove the future anymore. They simply assumed it. This is why the early 60s may be the most mature expression of Chrome Age courage. The flamboyance of the rocket era remained, but it was refined. Proportions became cleaner. Ornament became more controlled. Glass areas were still generous. Rooflines were low and elegant. Full-size sedans and coupes achieved a calm authority that, for many enthusiasts, represents the true peak of American automotive beauty. The machine was still expressive, but no longer desperate to announce it. Then the world changed. Safety legislation, emissions pressures, insurance concerns, packaging realities, fuel anxiety, and manufacturing economics all began to narrow the space in which styling could operate. The oil crisis of the 1970s turned size and extravagance into liabilities. Chrome retreated, bumpers changed. Body integrity and federal compliance began to reshape form. The future no longer looked like a jet, it looked uncertain. And with that uncertainty, courage in styling began to fade. Not disappear overnight, but fade. By the late 70s and 80s, American car design still had moments of interest, but the old grand confidence was gone. The optimism that had once allowed a family car to look like an event had been replaced by compromise, caution, and eventually a different sort of image making altogether. This is why Chrome Age cars still have such emotional force. They do not merely remind us of a design period. They remind us of a period when confidence was not embarrassed to look like confidence, when beauty was not separated from utility, when the family car could still be elegant, the luxury car could still be theatrical, and even the ordinary sedan was allowed to wear a little bit of glamour. And more than that, they remind us that mass design can still carry conviction, because that is what the best Chrome Age cars really offered. conviction in metal. A willingness to commit to form, to identity, to ornament, to silhouette, to brightness, to visual generosity, to the belief that the world could be improved not only through engineering, but through style. That belief may sound superficial to some people. It is not. Design teaches us what a culture admires. The America of the Chrome Age admired scale, optimism, movement, status, glamour, and visible progress. The cars became mirrors of that admiration. They also became survivors of it. Today, when you see one of these machines restored properly, something remarkable happens. The design still works. Not because it is nostalgic, but because it is legible. The lines still make sense. The trim still belongs. The mass still carries authority. The colors still warm the eye. The chrome still catches light like ceremony. The car still has something to say. And what it says is not subtle. It says that for a brief period in American history, the automobile was allowed to be brave. Brave enough to be large. Brave enough to be expressive. Brave enough to be beautiful in public. Brave enough to believe that a machine made for ordinary roads could still carry extraordinary style. That is why this era remains untouchable. Not because every car was perfect, not because every detail aged well, but because the best of them were built with a kind of visual courage that modern design rarely dares to approach. The Chrome Age gave us machines that were impractical at times, excessive at times, and occasionally absurd. But they were never forgettable. And that may be the highest compliment any design can earn. Because a forgettable car serves its function and disappears. A great car enters the road, the memory, and the culture all at once. The best American machines of the Chrome Age did exactly that. They turned highways into parade routes, parking lots into exhibitions, driveways into declarations. They transformed transportation into theater and did it without shame. And perhaps that is why their beauty still feels so alive. Because courage does not age the way fashion does. Courage survives. So when you see chrome catching sunlight across the shoulder of a 1958 coupe, or a wraparound windshield reflecting the sky over a long hood, or the measured confidence of a 1963 full-size sedan standing perfectly still, remember what you are really looking at. Not just an old car, but a machine from an era when design still believed that the future should be faced boldly, beautifully, and without apology. If this golden age still speaks to you, subscribe to Timeless Treasures and tell me which Chrome Age machine you believe captured American courage better than any other.